Hello and welcome to the Motoring News Zone, the show you take you for all the biggest stories in the world of cars right now. This week, a car parts supplier has gone bankrupt with billions in debt. A vandal who damaged 70 BMWs and Mercedes cars is now behind bars. And a learner driver failed their practical driving test because they used the regenerative braking in their EV. But was that a fair decision? Find out that and a whole lot more in today's show. If you're watching on YouTube, skip to the timestamps in the video description to see the story that you're most interested in. So, without further delay, let's dive in. A giant auto parts supplier has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the United States with billions of dollars of debts. How many billions? About 6 of them. Quite a few to say the least. But let's have a look at why this has happened, guys, because this is a worrying sign. We're seeing a lot of suppliers further down the supply chain rather than the people that are actually, manufacturing their products. The suppliers, they are really struggling. It does feel a bit like a house of cards in effect. You take out the bottom cards and everybody falls down as a result. But is this a big problem? Is this something to worry about? Let's have a look, guys. So when it comes to borrowing money, businesses can do this in a way that is different to other entities, like people, for example, and other institutions. It's not the same as you personally going for something. Businesses have ways of restructuring their debts and going about all of that to make it work effectively. But when it doesn't work, things can go very badly, and that very much does apply to this company. This company in question is the Carnaby/First Brands Group, and they have filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the United States. They did this in the Southern District of Texas on September 25th, listing between $500 million to $1 billion in assets and between $1 and $10 billion in liabilities, according to court filings. Basically, they have about $1 billion in terms of the physical items they have, their assets, and when it comes to their debts, their liabilities, the money they owe to various different people and companies, up to $10 billion. Like I said, $6 billion is the figure that's being quoted specifically, so almost slap bang in the middle of that. A number of related filings were reported as well. This includes multiple filings under various iterations of the Carnaby name. First Brands Group has been under intense scrutiny for some of its borrowing practices, according to the Financial Times. First Brand has come under intense, for example, their use of off-balance sheet debt tied to invoices and inventory. And some lenders fears this financing was poorly disclosed in the main operating entity's balance sheet, making it difficult for creditors to know how much debt there is in total, which is obviously a big problem when you declare bankruptcy. Certain creditors estimate that First Brands raised as much as $10 billion in debt and off-balance sheet financing. The filing for the group of Carnaby companies states that they have an estimated liability of between $1 and $10 billion against assets of just half. So First Brands Group, who were they, should we say? They're no longer a thing really at this point, so we can't really say who are they. Well, essentially, they are a parts supplier to different automotive manufacturers, including, of course, Michelin, one of the biggest tyre suppliers in the world. And there might be some names in here that you actually recognise in terms of the parts they supply. Rebestos, Centric Parts, StopTech Performance Brakes, Framford, Airtex and Carter Fuel, Anco Wiper Blades, among many, many others. However, this is not something that's come completely out of the blue. A lot of people were seeing them struggle, and I'm sure a lot of people are not that surprised to see them go under. Nevertheless, of course, it is rather sad that it's come to this. And, a lot of people are blaming the company themselves, but a lot of people are also blaming those that they supply, is really putting a squeeze on this part of the industry. The companies themselves getting a bit too greedy, and as a result, unfortunately, these guys have gone under. But yeah, guys, are you surprised to see this? Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below, as always. So we're no strangers to crime here on the channel, guys. We do cover quite a few different crime stories when it comes to cars, and this one is absolutely shocking. I don't know how this guy ever thought he was going to get away with this. Someone who showed up in a Range Rover, then tore through 70, not 17, not 7, 70 cars at BMW and Mercedes dealerships. Some people, man, some people just want to watch the world burn, or at least vandalize a lot of cars anyway. Maybe this guy doesn't like German cars. I'm not sure what's going on here, but let's have a look at this full story, guys. Let's have a look at what's happened here, because, yeah, this is absolutely incredible. And not in a good way. Not in a good way. Crime does not pay, but some people still get away with it. When it comes to serial offenders, whether it being killers or in this case car vandals, they often feel like they're untouchable. After they've done a few different acts of violence, they think they can get away with it. They get a bit too cocky, they get a bit too overconfident as a result, and that may well have applied to this guy who, like I said, damaged no less than 70 vehicles. Because he is now behind bars, thankfully. According to the Salem police in the state of Oregon, the first incident happened on September 11th. Surveillance cameras caught a person authorities believe to be the suspect damaging roughly 35 cars at a Mercedes and Acura of Salem and Commercial Street SE. Investigators estimate the person caused roughly $58,000 worth of damage that night alone. Rookie numbers. Video from the scene obtained by KOIN shows a person driving into the parking lot in a Range Rover Evoque. The driver gets out and appears to slash tyres and perhaps key a few cars along the way. Evidently, there were some customer cars there for service or awaiting pickup. Things only ramped up from there though, because 3 days later a similar scene played out at a BMW of Salem and Van Ness Avenue Street Northeast. This time the perp damaged, and this time he damaged another 35 vehicles but caused some $100,000 worth of damage. He's getting, okay, that's more like it, 6 figures. On top of that, officers believe they've identified at least 20 individual victims of the same suspect outside the dealership. Authorities have identified the suspect as Brian Werner of Kalispell, Montana. So he's on a bit of a road trip, as it turns out, to go over to Oregon. He was taken into custody on Monday, September the 16th on charges of DUI and reckless driving. Police soon learned that Werner already had an outstanding warrant back home in Montana tied to incidents involving firearms and criminal mischief. In the end, they seized Werner's vehicle and numerous firearms, according to NBC Montana. And it's possible as well that not all of his crimes have been identified. This guy could be linked to potential incidents as well. After all, going in the deep end with 35 vandalism acts like that, it does seem like a bit much. You'd probably start a bit smaller. But then again, I'm not a criminal. I don't know these things. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm smiling and laughing through a lot of this because at the end of the day, the companies that are involved in this, they will have insurance on those vehicles. They will get the money back. This guy's going to spend a decent amount of money. This guy's going to spend a decent amount of time, though, behind bars, I do imagine, for what he has done here. But yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think there's more when it comes to this thing? He's a serial vandalizer of vehicles that has been on a streak for quite some time now. I want to hear what you have to say in the comments below, as always. Jaguar Land Rover right now in the UK are really struggling, to put it extremely mildly. Their production line has almost been stopped now for a month due to the cyber attack that they suffered at the very end of August. And in terms of it restarting again, it's not going to get starting until next week at the absolute earliest. The company has confirmed that production will remain stopped until at least the 1st of October, and I'd wager it'll probably go longer than that as well. Essentially, this has all had to be shut down because of the security breach in the IT systems. It's pretty certain that these hackers were able to get into the internal systems, and therefore getting them out again, getting them unable to be accessed again. You know, they basically need to beef up their IT systems. They need to test it extensively to make sure that this shouldn't or can't happen again. And while that happens, obviously, Land Rover are not making any cars. I mean, Jaguar, obviously, they're not making any cars anyway. They're doing their big rebrand next year. But Land Rover are, I think, in terms of their overall volume, I think they're the largest car maker in the United Kingdom, which is really saying something. So them being shut for even a few days, you know, that is hundreds of thousands of pounds in revenue they are losing out on. I saw a news announcement that I read to you guys quite a little bit ago, going over how every single day that passes, you know, they're losing anywhere between 50 and 100,000 pounds. And the knock-on effect from this is absolutely massive. You know, it's not just the employees of Land Rover, but it's also the employees of suppliers to Land Rover, Jaguar Land Rover, indeed. You know, they're all potentially going to go out of business too. You know, the government here in the UK is being urged to introduce a furlough scheme for the employees of these suppliers. And on top of the suppliers as well, you know, and speaking of those suppliers, essentially, what is essentially going to happen is that the taxpayers now, according to this announcement I've got here on the channel for you guys, the taxpayers here in the UK are effectively going to have to keep the companies afloat, which again leans into the furlough scheme I was talking about before. But let's have a look at the full announcement, guys, and I'll give my thoughts on this in the comments below. It's not what you want to hear at the end of the day as a UK taxpayer, But if it keeps Jaguar Land Rover afloat, which is a company that employs thousands of people, and you talk about the suppliers, which, collectively probably employ thousands of people as well, the alternative is having all these people potentially out on the street, unable to, pay their bills, and being reliant on welfare. And who pays for the welfare anyway? The UK taxpayer. So, this does seem like it could be a solution that would help, but let's have a look, guys. Ministers are considering buying parts from Jaguar Land Rover's suppliers to save them from collapse after a cyber attack halted production. Peter Kyle, the business secretary, is working over plans to save JLR's suppliers from the brink of bankruptcy after rejecting calls for a furlough scheme, according to ITV. Instead, the government plans to purchase parts from the suppliers directly and sell them back to JLR when it restarts production. So essentially, they're going to take some stock off them, they are going to hold it, and then they are going to release it to JLR. So the suppliers still get the money they would have got anyway, and JLR still gets the parts they were going to get anyway, and the companies in question can stay afloat, they can survive. But according to other reports, they've already laid off lots of staff. Some companies already laid off half their workforce over this already. I mean, this will help, but a lot of damage has already been done effectively. The car maker halted production at its 3 UK assembly plants based in Solihull, Halewood and Wolverhampton on the 31st of August after a cyber attack knocked out its systems. JLR has extended the pause until the 1st of October at the earliest, putting pressure on suppliers who in some cases have been forced to stop work and lay off staff as work dries up. The shutdowns have led to concerns that the suppliers could be plunged into bankruptcy amid fears of widespread job losses across the companies, which employ around 200,000 staff. It was way more than I thought it was, 200,000. On Tuesday, Mr. Kyle visited JLR and met executives. He refused to commit to a government bailout for suppliers, suggesting workers could sign on for unemployment benefits instead. Really, Kyle? Really? Anybody who knows how the universal credit system works in the UK will know will know that it is absolutely nowhere near having a full-time job. Nowhere near. Nowhere near. There is no way. If you've got a family, you've got a mortgage, you've got rent to pay, you've got a car to pay for, you cannot survive on universal credit. It is impossible. It is impossible. I don't care. The only way you can do it is if you have savings or you have, some other kind of income or something, but then universal credit payments go down. Yeah, they can do that, Mr. Kyle, but it's not really the same, is it? JLR has deployed 50 staff to process a backlog of £300 million worth of payments owed to its suppliers in a scramble to save them from insolvency, according to Bloomberg. Industry experts have estimated the shutdowns are currently blocking JLR from manufacturing around 1,000 new vehicles a day, and they've been closed for a month. So again, you add that up, 30,000 vehicles, that's massive. And indeed, the cost of this is estimated at around £72 million in lost sales for every day that production and its factories have remained closed so far. And that number will increase. It'll be at least 100 million by the end of this. It has now emerged that JLR may have to carry the full cost of the hack after reports suggested the car maker had no cyber insurance policy in place at the time of the attack. Oh my God. Remember what I said a few weeks ago when I said about companies not really caring about their internal IT systems? I can rage about this for a long time. I've worked in that industry. These executives do not give a about that. And this proves it. This proves it. And it's the people at the bottom that suffer. It's the suppliers that suffer. Not the board. Not the board. No, they won't suffer for this. They should, but they won't. The company was negotiating the policy through its insurance broker, Lockton, but had failed to finalise a deal when it was attacked, the insurer reported. I mean, cyber attacks aren't new, and you definitely should have got something in place, especially after what happened to Marks & Sparks a few months back as well. For those that aren't aware, Marks & Spencer's got hacked as well earlier this year, and they had to close their IT systems for 2, 3, 4 months, I think it was in the end, which was very detrimental to them. But they have brick and mortar stores that they can still do business with. They didn't go under because of it. JLR's a bit different though. They're in a much bigger predicament. JLR and Lockton declined to comment. Shock. The government also declined to comment. Shock. Separately, new figures from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT, showed that the UK motor vehicle production fell by 18% to fewer than 38,700 vehicles and in August after rising in the prior 2 months. So in September, it's going to be even worse, surely. Production of hybrid and battery vehicles rose by more than 2/5 from a year earlier, with the sector accounting for 45% of all units built, the second highest share on record. The figures don't include the impact of the cyber attack on JLR, which will likely to be evident in September's data, as I just said. Craziness, absolute craziness. I mean, you reap what you sow at the end of the day. You don't buy insurance and you get done. You kind of got only yourself to blame at that point. And like I said, it's the people at the bottom. They're going to foot the bill, you know. Rolls downhill, as the old saying goes. So we'll see what happens, guys. But yeah, JLR. I mean, you don't want to see it because it's a proper car company from the UK. You don't like to see this kind of business going away, but they'll survive. They'll survive, but they'll take a big hit from this for sure. And they're not out of the woods yet. They're still not resumed production. That's going to come at some point, but when? Who knows at this point? This is shocking. Like, genuinely, this is absolutely awful. You know, the badge of made in China is not a badge of honour. It's a badge of dishonour, if anything. You see that and you think it's cheaply made. It's not particularly good quality. And that also extends to airbags, because fake airbags from China are exploding in cars in the United States and, unsurprisingly, killing people as a result. This is just downright terrible. This is a safety device that is meant to be used to save people's lives in the event of a head-on collision or another large accident while you're driving around, and to see that, you know, this is potentially killing people instead, it's the most tragic of ironies. It really, really is. So how has this happened? Well, a new federal investigation is shining a light on potentially deadly aftermarket airbag parts after a series of crashes have exposed catastrophic failures. The NHTSA has opened a probe following 7 incidents linked to faulty inflators, 5 of which proved fatal. The issue has drawn a sharp warning from the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, who labelled the devices as dangerous. The components under scrutiny are believed to come from Jialing Province Ditiano Safety Technology, better known as DTN airbag. Investigators allege that the company's inflators contain volatile chemicals that ignite during deployment, causing the airbag to inflate violently and without control. According to the Wall Street Journal, which first reported on the investigation, they noted that the NHTSA has contacted DTN regarding the 7 aforementioned incidents, and one of these happened as recently as July. It is understood that many repair shops and assemblers have been importing the cheap airbag inflators from overseas, often without realising it. The journal reports that DTN's products are counterfeits that closely mimic genuine parts, yet they're sold at a fraction of the price, sometimes as little as 1/10 of the cost of an actual functioning airbag. These fakes are often constructed with poor quality materials and are more likely to fail because they are only imitations of the engineering that goes into the real product, according to Bob Stewart. Bob Stewart said, who is the president of the Automotive Anti-Counterfeiting Council and Global Brand Protection Manager at GM. The issue first surfaced in the United States when the family of 22-year-old Destiny Biasi filed a lawsuit in the Sunshine State. The young mother was killed in a crash while travelling at just 30 miles per hour in a 2020 Chevrolet Malibu. Investigators allege that the counterfeit DTN inflator had been installed and that it exploded like a grenade, sending sharp pieces of metal and plastic into her neck. My God. DTN themselves, meanwhile, have said that their products are not legally for sale in the United States and that they do not operate there. So third-party sellers effectively getting a hold of these, and maybe this is some garages or something, some workshops, buying them for cheap and installing them. Maybe they realise that they are not the real thing. Maybe they don't. Maybe they look at the price and don't ask questions later. There needs to be a full investigation into this because it's already cost 5 people's lives that we know of. There will be more, and there will likely be more in the future as well, if these are as widespread as what people are saying they are, you know. So it's harrowing. It really, really is. These safety devices are killing people more than the actual accidents themselves, by the sounds of things. I mean, if it explodes like that and sends metal and plastic, you know, to your face, to your chest, to your neck, you know, that can very easily kill you. So it's no wonder what's happened to that poor lady on that trip. But yeah, we'll bring you any updates as it comes, guys. That's absolutely horrifying. That really, really is. I always hear different things when it comes to driving tests and making use of the technology that's actually in there. When I first started learning to drive, so around 2016, 2017, I was told in no uncertain terms when I first started learning to drive back in 2016, 2017, something like that, that you cannot use the reversing camera to actually see behind you. You have to ignore it being there. That's what I was told back then. However, nowadays, you can still use it. Obviously, use your mirrors as well, but you can still use that in the middle. I was told initially that if you use that, if you rely on that, then they're going to fail you straight away. It's really odd because a lot of new cars have this technology. It's pretty commonplace nowadays. But brakes, traditional brakes anyway, there's something that when it comes to electric vehicles are not used that much really. Of course, a lot of EVs these days have regenerative braking. Or regen braking, I'm going to say from now on, because I find that word so hard to say. But a lot of cars nowadays have these regen brakes, and because of that, people don't use the actual brakes as much. And there are some circumstances, some relatively short drives, where you may barely use them at all. And that applied to a woman who was taking her driving test recently, and she failed it as a result. Harsh? Fair? Let's get into the details and decide that one, guys. So a student in North Bay, Ontario in Canada failed her full road test after relying on the Tesla Model Y's regen function to slow the car down. Because the system reduced speed without her pressing the brake pedal, the examiner marked her down. Eric Simard told CBC News in Canada that his daughter was driving his Tesla and didn't know how to deactivate the brake regen. The Drive Test Ontario examiner allegedly told her that she couldn't pause the test to call her dad to how to switch it out, and checked a box on the test to report that the vehicle was out of order, though it was only performing as intended. All right, so we've got two things there immediately. I mean, if you're having to call someone in the middle of your test to find out, I don't care if they're your dad or whatever, if you're calling them in the middle of your test to find out how to drive the car that you're in, I'm sorry, but immediately you got major problems right there. Interestingly though, the examiner's saying that the vehicle was out of order when it was actually performing as it should be, but it was just a setting that they had on there that they didn't want to be on there. Interesting. That seems like two wrongs there, one from the driver and one from the instructor. I find it pretty frustrating because even though it's regen braking and you're not using the brake pedal, you're clearly the one that is in full control of making the vehicle come to a stop or slow down, according to the father. Even more frustrating, when Simard posted about his experience on Facebook, he learned that some Ontario learners had been allowed to use the regen braking effect on their practical tests, though others have been asked by their examiners to deactivate it. The mixed response appears to be due to the Drive Test Ontario and Ontario's Ministry of Transportation not having a clear stance on the new technology. Applicants are expected to understand how their vehicle system, including lane cantering and regen braking, adaptive cruise control, and automated parking, may affect handling and performance during a road test. Julia Caslin, who is a spokesperson for the MOT, told Canada's CBC via email, but she made no mention of drivers being required to push the brake pedal to bring a car to a stop, and nor is there any reference to regen braking on their website. So every country has different regulations for driving, that is a fact, and Canada's is seemingly different there as well. But at the end, and of course that does go to Ontario's in Canada's as well. And of course that does apply to Ontario, Canada as well. But is it right that it should be switched off? After all, that is something that most people will have when they are driving an electric vehicle, which is a popular mode of transport. It's not exactly it's not exactly an unheard of powertrain at the end of the day, you know? I think at the end of the day, as long as the person is in control of the car and is able to stop just in case the regen braking stops working, I think that's perfectly fine personally. But it does seem as though these regulations haven't really caught up. Again, mentioning the reversing camera, what I said before, you know, at first, when I first started learning 9 years ago or so, it was not allowed. But then when I passed my test in 2020, it was fine. My instructor said, yeah, use it, no problem, which was a big change, you know. So again, a lot of these things are being developed faster than the regulations can keep up with. However, the fact that she didn't know how to turn it off, I think that's kind of a red mark really against her. I think that's kind of a... However, the fact that she didn't know how to turn it off, that's kind of a black mark against her, really, if I'm being totally honest. But yeah, guys, get your thoughts in the comments below. Was she right to be failed? Were the regulations incorrectly applied on this one? I want to hear what you have to say on this, as always, guys. Like, share, comment, subscribe, as always, guys. Have a fantastic day wherever you're in the world today, and we'll see you very soon.